Merry Christmas and welcome to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host Clint Campbell and you're listening to episode number 43. Today we are talking After the Shot and Blood Track and Whitetail with Shane Weist of Arrow Wild Company. So stay tuned. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And as always, I am joined by my esteemed colleague from the Midwest, weighing in at a svelte 225 pounds, 230 pounds, hailing from the great state of Kentucky by way of Iowa, the new and undisputed heavyweight champion of, I don't know, man. I ran out of gas. My brother John. Yeah. Johnny Utah.
Holla.
Holla.
Hey, what's happening, dude? How you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. Today was a long day, not to get into the doldrums of real work land, but some things have changed a little bit in real work land. So I used to work in the city. I don't work in the city anymore. But the agency that I work at actually has an office in the city, and so I've changed the teams that I'm working with, and part of them works out of the city office. So today I had to jump back on the train and commute into the city, and got to say I didn't miss it. It's the train is a weird. I don't know, man. Like train people. Have you ever experienced train people, like real train people?
No, when you say train, I mean, are you talking like Casey Jones style train or like public bus?
I'm talking
service?
like public bus, public transportation, train.
Oh, okay,
people.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's
that's a different breed. Not saying good or bad. Right. It's just a different breed.
It is a different breed. So there's levels of train people, right? There's like train people like me. They're just normal people trying to get to work, right? And then there's the train people that, they look like they're zombies, right? It's like you can look at them and you're like, man, that person totally hates their life. You know what I mean? And it's like you feel bad for them, but it's just like they look gray and defeated and there's no joy in their life. And then there's I live in the train station train people. I saw a woman one day like barefoot. Train stations are nasty too. They smell like pee. And she's like full on like downward facing dog busting out full yoga moves on the train station platform at like 5:30, which is
awesome.
Kind of disgusting. And then there's like the weird guy that I really want to kind of talk to, who is like, so I haven't ridden the train for 3 years, right? Because I've not worked in the city for 3 years. But I get on the train today, and there was just one guy whenever I did ride the train all the time that always got on. He would be reading a book. He got on way before me at some point, and he was reading a book, an older fella, long white beard. He's got the cigarette stains on his white mustache, right, from smoking. And he was always reading a book, but he would always just kind of do these weird things. Like you could tell he was just like very interesting guy. We'll say he's eccentric, right? And I haven't seen him in 3 years. And lo and behold, I get on the train today, and who is on the train? Book guy, hanging out. And it's like I literally now where I live, I get on the train at almost the last stop. And I get off in the city almost at the last stop. So I'm not sure where that guy's going, or maybe he just rides the train and reads. I'm not sure.
He might just ride the train. Gandalf of Pennsylvania is just riding the train.
That is it, man. He is Gandalf of Pennsylvania. I kind of want to hang out with that guy, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I kind of want to
buy him a drink.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, hey, man, what are you reading? But then there's also that fear where I'm like, I don't know that I want to get sucked into that because it could get kind of deep. You know what I mean? And then I got like,
he looks at you and he goes, "I'm not on Tinder."
Right. Or he says, "I'd like to wear your skin." It's like, then it gets weird. Yeah. And then I got like an hour train ride with this guy who wants to, Buffalo Bill me.
Yeah. My take on the train is, in my past law enforcement life, sometimes we had some involvements with trains and, public transportation. We called them the tank bus. It was the Transit Authority of Northern Kentucky.
Yeah.
And so the tank buses, you would have some people on there that generally were just pissed at the world.
Yeah.
For a multitude of reasons. Either their car got repoed, or maybe their car just broke down in the shop. for whatever reason, they didn't have an automobile, so they're forced to do the tank, which is awesome. They're getting up and they're going to work, so that was great. You had some people that maybe they had their driver's license taken for a DUI or something like that, so they're generally not happy to be on the tank bus.
Right.
And then you had other people that were conscious and just saying, hey, no sense in putting more pollution out there. I'm going to take public transportation and, go that route. But I think even after a little while, they start looking at some of the other people that are on the bus and they're like, man, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would take a different dude. That's awesome. I couldn't do it. I generally don't like people enough to ride in a vehicle with that many people,
Yeah, I have a touching thing, for anyone out there that doesn't know me personally. It's like I have a really weird touching thing, and it's weird because, folks, being a musician for as long as I was, folks will invite me out to go to a concert and be like, hey, man, I got an extra ticket. It happened just like last week. Like, hey, I got an extra ticket to this concert. You want to go? The guy from work,
Sure.
And it was a band that I would absolutely enjoy going to see. And he's asked me a couple different times to go to different shows, and I was like, nah, man, thanks, I appreciate it, but I'm going to pass. And at one point, he still continues to ask, but this is, a year or so ago, he asked me at one point, he's like, just curious. He's like, you don't seem like you go to a lot of shows, and I usually just try to chalk it up to like, oh man, I've been to a lot of shows because I played a lot of shows and just kind of burn out or whatever. And it's usually like suffices or whatever. But the truth of the matter is that I have a weird thing whenever I'm in a crowd of people, like I don't like to be touched. So when I go to a concert and it's standing room only and I don't have a dedicated seat to where I'm like, this is my territory, like this is mine. Don't infringe upon it. As long as you stay on either side of my armrest, we're going to be cool. But like if your arm and your coat is like laying on my shoulder, like I'm going to freak out. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's like I just get like this blind rage, and then I'm just like, I got to leave. So I explained that to him, and I was like, I'm not the most fun person to go to a concert with in the standing room only because I want to just like commit barehanded murder the entire time someone's touching me while I'm there. I was like, it's not a good experience for me and whomever I'm going with. So the train is kind of like that for me, especially in the winter when everyone has their big coats on, like you got like this warm squish up against you. It's just like, yeah, they don't make enough medication for that.
If anybody's listening to this podcast and they haven't tuned off yet.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, planes, trains, automobiles, squishy coats. Yeah, I'm out.
Yeah.
If anybody's still listening, I would be curious because I guarantee you there's a medical term that are people who are, I know there's a medical term for, because it probably falls into like just like a claustrophobia kind of thing, but
right.
Maybe a fear of other people's squishy coats.
Right. Yeah. Or the warm mush of someone's, gelatinous body rolling over onto my side of the seat up against me. It's like, it skeeves me out, man. But we are here to talk about deer hunting. We have a super awesome guest coming on today.
Yes.
Shane Weist. I think I said his name right.
He's Weist.
Yeah, he's actually a good buddy of John's. He's part of the Arrow Wild Company TV show. And we're going to be talking about doing some blood tracking and tracking with dogs and stuff. And I'm super pumped to have him on to kind of touch on this because this is one of those things where I feel like we practice everything during the course of the year. I mean, I know you're this way too, but it's like I'll practice hanging my stand if I'm going to do running guns a lot that year. It's like I'll go out and I'll practice in the dark, and I'll do the same thing with my climber, and I practice shooting my bow, and I get into shape, and I do all those things to practice for the season. But it's like the important part of like the retrieval of the animal afterwards, it's like you never practice it, right? And so it's one of those things where you don't ever get an opportunity to practice it. It's like it's just game day, and there's a lot of challenges that kind of come along with that. So I'm really interested to talk to Shane and see what all kinds of tips he can give us and the experiences that he's had. But before we do that, what's new in the whitetail woods for Johnny Utah? What's the plan, man?
Well, right now it is shotgun season in Iowa, and I find it's odd. Not a lot of people know this about Iowa, that when shotgun season 1 comes in, you cannot archery hunt, even if you wear orange. Oh, wow. There is no archery hunting that's legally allowed. The first season runs, I believe it's 5 days. Could be 6. I think it's 5. I think it's 5 days first season, and then today and tomorrow is no hunting at all by anybody with any weapon. Then we go into a second shotgun season that runs from the 9th through the 17th. And then on December 18th starts, they call it late muzzleloader season, but you can use a bow and you don't have to wear orange. But it starts back late muzzle archery season. And then that'll run all the way through January 10th. Now, that is the idea. Right. That would be if there is still white-tailed deer still living in the woods.
Yeah.
Now, what I want everybody to do, anybody listening, close your eyes for a second. Unless you're driving, please keep your eyes open. But if you're not driving, close your eyes. Think of Sylvester Stallone in any of the Rambo movies. Have him wear an orange vest and an orange hat. And he's going to be with 15 to 20 people. And they're driving the same pieces of property 5 days straight. Because, I mean, you got to make sure that you shot every deer that lives there, right?
Right. Yeah.
A little bit of sarcasm you can sense in my voice a little bit. No, man, I like to give the shotgun guys a hard time, and we've talked about this, and I feel like I'm kind of kicking the dead horse a little bit, but
right.
I don't have anything against shotgun hunting. I don't have anything against rifle hunting. I don't have anything against ninja, the throwing stars and nunchucks and stuff either. What I have against is the lack of conservation efforts and just the straight up murdering of every whitetail that moves.
Yeah.
That's what I have a problem with. So that's where I'm at, man. I'm in downtime right now. I'm in limbo. It's nice to catch a breather, regroup, wash the camo, clean the camera lenses. I've been doing some maintenance. My bowstring looks like I've been dragging it through a cactus.
Yeah.
So re-waxing my string and, just little things like that. And, I had a couple of days where it was raining, so you get a couple of nuts and bolts that get a little rusty and stuff like that. So it's been a good time for me to do some maintenance, and get back to the day job because, I have a real job that actually pays my real bills, and I still get to hunt for fun. But so I'm working on the real job, and that's me, man. That's what I'm waiting on.
Nice. My deal is this: I'm this weekend. So Pennsylvania, you can hunt, especially here in the eastern part of the state. There's you can hunt with your bow pretty much during any of the hunting seasons, and then in the eastern part of the state, there's no gap, there's no shut off for archery. So like in the western part of the state, there is. So like your archery season shuts off. You have your rifle season that comes in, and then after rifle season, there's a little bit of a lull, and you can't. Late season for bow doesn't come back in until the day after Christmas, usually like the 26th. But out here on the eastern part of the state, they're a little bit more liberal with the hunting laws, only because you have a lot more population density, and the deer numbers being what they are, not a lot of hunters and stuff like that. So in this area particularly, so that season doesn't stop. So I'm actually going to go do some doe management with a buddy of mine this weekend. So that's a plan there to try to fill the freezer up, since I have no buck tag left here in PA. And then I think the following weekend I'm going to do a little goose hunting. So that's going to be cool. First time goose hunting. We'll see how much success I have with that. And then the same as you, man, I've been just doing some maintenance. I started moving some cameras. I pulled some cameras just to get some new batteries in them, kind of clean them up and get them ready to put out for a late season to try to catch inventory of what's going on these properties, and kind of starting to make next year's plan already. You know what I mean? As crazy as it sounds, it's like I started sitting down and thinking about what I want to do for any type of habitat management and food plots and stuff like that here coming into the next year. And that's kind of where I'm at, man. So I think if it's all the whitetail updates, bro, we'll go ahead and get Shane on the horn and talk about some blood tracking.
Yes. Yeah. And right before we call here, so Shane Weist, I got to meet Shane back in 2013, and him and I were both on a different web show. And, whenever I branched away, he wanted to come on board, with my new show. So that made me feel, real good. Shane is seriously one of the nicest, if not the nicest individual I've ever met in my life. This guy is he's an awesome hunter. He's an awesome family man. And he has this Bavarian Mountain Hound, as we'll talk about. And I'm sure he's going to tell a few jokes about this dog, but it is the most comical thing in the world. I've been with him at some shows where he's got to bring his dog in the show. And if I had $1 for every time that somebody asked him, hey, what kind of dog is that? You and I would share it with you, and you and I could both quit our jobs tomorrow. That's a fact. It's unbelievable. Nice. But he's got this Bavarian Mountain Hound, and he's gotten into blood tracking as a good way to, bond with the dog, exercise the dog. And as I know we're going to get into, it's pretty crazy the things that he's been able to learn from the dog. And I don't want to spoil it. I'll let him tell some of those reasons, but this is going to be cool.
Nice. Well, with that, man, that was a good lead in. Let's go ahead and get Shane on the horn and get this party cracking. Before we get Shane dialed in, let's take a quick break to hear a word about our partners at Exodus Outdoor Gear. Christmas is nearly here. There's only a couple shopping days left. And if you have not purchased an Exodus trail camera either for yourself, wrapped it, put it under the tree, and acted surprised that you got exactly what you wanted, or maybe you've got a hunter in your life that could use some new trail cameras, head over to the ExodusOutdoorGear.com website and pick up an Exodus Lift 2 camera. If you do that, head to the checkout and punch in the promo code TRUTH, and you will save yourself $20. With that said, we're also doing an Exodus Lift 2 giveaway. All you have to do to get entered for that giveaway or for that drawing is head to the truthfromthestand.com website and submit your information into the Truth from the Stand email newsletter. You do that, we will then have a random drawing once we hit the 200 submission level, and we will then announce the winner. And now back to the show. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today we are joined by Shane Weist. I almost said Zane, man. I had a buddy growing up, or a guy I grew up with in high school. His name was Zane Weist. And for the life of me, I want to call you Zane. So if I do that, just stop me and tell me that I've called you Zane, and I'll apologize profusely.
I've been called worse. You're fine.
Right on. I hear you. But we have Shane on the line today, and what we're talking about, as John and I kind of mentioned in the upfront, is we're talking about blood tracking. And Shane, just to kind of bring you up to speed, one of the things that I had mentioned, we can dive into this more, but it's interesting that we do all this practice and preparation and stuff for hunting, whether it's archery or what have you during the off season. And a big part of the hunt is the recovery, of course, right? And there's not a great way to practice for that. We shoot our bows. We practice, we do our scouting, and we'll take a tree stand and practice doing a hang and hunt. So we're able to do it cleanly and quietly in the dark and stuff like that. But when it comes down to the important part of harvesting and actually, getting the animal out of the timber, that's a part that we don't get a chance to practice. And it might be one of the most vital parts of the hunt in totality. Which I just think is kind of an interesting thing. Before we dive into all the good, juicy details of tracking, man, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you started hunting, and what you do for a living?
Well, I grew up out kind of in a subdivision out in the country, and I kind of grew up just flinging arrows at everything that I could fling arrows at. It became legal for me to hunt when I was 12, and I started right in. Going after him with the bow. It took, how many years did it take before I finally took a deer with a bow? I think I was 15 when I finally shot one.
Nice.
I shot at several leading up to that point, but when I was 15, I finally did harvest my first deer with a bow. And I've just been chasing whitetails ever since. Hunting's always been something that I've just been really passionate about, and bow hunting in particular. I really don't do a whole lot of gun hunting to speak of. I haven't bought a gun tag in several years now. I just have such a passion for bow hunting that, that's my weapon of choice, I guess, when I'm going into the timber. So.
Right. What state are you are you coming from?
So I'm in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of near the Madison area. If people out there are familiar with Madison, I'm a little south of Madison, about 20 minutes or so.
Okay. And what type of terrain and stuff are you getting into during your hunts most of the time? And do you go out of state as well?
I have been out of state. I've gone to Iowa. Let's see, a couple different years. I've bow hunted in Iowa, but no, pretty much just Wisconsin. The terrain is I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag of terrain here. We've got our wetlands and, kind of low-lying areas and things like that. We've got big hill country and a lot of crop fields and stuff like that. So we kind of have a mixture of everything here. Kind of where I'm at. I've got different properties that offer different terrain, I guess.
Right. So, speaking of getting on the hunt and flinging arrows at things, how was your 2017 season so far? Are you in the chips, so that, as they say, or are you still grinding?
Yeah, no, we'll still keep after it. Our season goes until, gosh, I can't remember. It's the first 4 or 5 days, something like that, usually into January. So I'd like to do a lot of late season bow hunting too. As John knows, I enjoy the cold weather, but no, it started. I think our season started this year around, I want to say it was like the 17th of September, something like that. I still haven't actually. My goal every year is to try to take a couple does. I still haven't even gotten a single doe yet, but passed up some nice deer. The one deer in particular that I was after, actually, the neighbor harvested. Gosh, when was that? Mid October sometime. That deer usually didn't come over onto our farm until more into the late October to November, like when the rut starts kicking in here.
Right.
So yeah, he got harvested before I really even had a chance to get him, to be honest with you. So, and like I say, he was the buck of choice. And then we had a couple other deer that I wanted to get a look at, kind of that I would decide from the tree if I wanted to shoot one or not. But yeah, I passed up a couple nice ones. I did get to see one of the real nice ones. One morning. It was real kind of a miserable morning, went raining real hard, and I decided to go out anyway. And I actually did see the buck I was after that morning. I actually had him within bow range, but he came through chasing some does, so I never had an opportunity to take the shot. But like I said, it's passed up some nice ones. Got to see at least one shooter, but yeah, like I said, still grinding though. We're I kind of wish we had some snow on the ground for late season. That makes it a little bit more fun, but we're sitting with no snow on the ground currently. So.
Wow. I can't believe in Wisconsin you don't have any snow yet. I think we're actually supposed to get some this weekend.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, they were calling for, I think, 1 or 2 tomorrow night, okay. But nothing major. I mean, I think we were single digits for wind chills and stuff today, so it's definitely cold enough. We just don't have any on the ground.
Right. It's like my thing is, if it's going to be cold, it might as well be snowy, so at least I can enjoy that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But, well, actually, last weekend we were almost 60, I think, last weekend for the high, so that was kind of weird. But
wow.
I'm ready for the snow.
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, so how does one get into being known for tracking? Like, that's just kind of an interesting skill set for people to, know that you're good at. And, I know that we talked a little bit on the, before we jumped on the call here, I know that you do have a dog that you use, but I'm just curious, how do you get into saying, tracking something that I want to do? Like, what's the kind of the precipice for that, or what's the launching point for that? Was it something that you had a friend who did it, and that you just kind of thought it was cool, or was it something you just kind of had an interest in?
Well, honestly, I mean, growing up, before I was old enough to hunt, I got to go along on a lot of tracking, scenarios or whatever when my dad would shoot one of our brothers or whatever. I have 2 older brothers and that hunted. And so, yeah, I always got to tag along when there was tracks. And it was always something I thought was kind of interesting. Just, a lot of the things that you learn when you're in the timber like that. But, it really kicked into high gear for me when I did get the dog. There's just something about going out there with the dog and tracking deer that it's just something I really, really enjoy. So, I've been tracking deer obviously for quite a while, but over the last couple of years, when I got involved with the dog is when it really kicked into high gear. So I mean, I know we were talking about maybe covering that later on during the conversation, but I'm just kind of curious. I mean, it sounds like a good place to start. It's what is it about the dog that really kind of kicked it into high gear? Is it the extra added dimension of using the dog, or is it the relationship with the dog? I'm just curious what that kind of, I guess, interest level is for you to ratchet it up. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a combination of a lot of things. I've always been a dog lover. I've been fortunate enough to have the dog before I have the one that I have now. He was a great dog. We had a great relationship with him. I'd spend every minute I could with that dog. And, they say a man's best friend. And I mean, I just love being with the dogs, and to get out into the timber and to watch. I mean, you learn so much from watching a dog. I've been out on several tracks with the dog I have now, and a lot of the clients that would call me out to track were, all of them are they're just enamored by, watching the dog work. And, and you can almost, when you, get well enough with the dog, you can kind of, know how she's going to react to certain, situations and stuff. And I'll even kind of almost call the shot for the client before she even gives it to me. It's just, there's a lot of give and take with the dog, reading the dog, and, and the dog kind of, it just, the things that she'll show me and things like that. It's just quite a connection, that you have. And that bond just builds more and more. The more tracks we take, the more and more I just love spending every minute out in the woods with her like that. So
no, I can understand that, man. I love dogs. I had a great dog. Wasn't a tracking dog, but I had a dog that was pretty special. And, it's something how those furry little guys get in your heart the way they do. You know what I mean? It's like nothing else. They become, one of your family, and it's kind of how you care for them. Is the same way as if they're a person. In some cases, maybe even more so. You know what I mean? It's that unconditional, unconditional love, man. It's like you could be angry at them 1 second and they know it, and then 2 seconds later they don't care. They still want to be your best buddy.
Yeah, they're always excited when you come home. There's just something about that. I just love it.
That's right, man. So I'm curious, man. What kind of dog do you have?
So I have a Bavarian Mountain Hound. They're a pretty rare breed here in the United States. She was actually brought over from Slovakia. So yeah, we've had her. I got her. Actually, we got her at Christmas. She was a year and a half when I got her. She's just very quickly grew to a very, loved dog. I've got two boys here at home, and my wife. She's just a great family dog. I mean, the kids just love her, and yeah, she's got quite a personality. I can tell you that. She's pretty cool.
Now, is that a big dog? I mean, what's the size? Can you give me like a?
She's like 43 pounds. So okay. And John, you've seen her before. I mean, you can attest to this. So, we do a lot of deer shows and things like that. Everybody asks, "Oh, what kind of dog is that?" "Oh, she's beautiful." And everybody thinks she looks like a really big dachshund. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the look she has, but I mean, she's quite a bit bigger than that. But she's kind of got like a reddish tint, and then she got like a dark. I guess her head's kind of black. But she's about 43 pounds. Real powerful little thing. Actually, you wouldn't probably think that of a dog of that size. But when we're tracking, she's got to be on a harness because she's got a lot of power in those back legs, and when she gets to pulling, you got to hold on tight. I can tell you that.
You got a good partner to do some dragging too. It sounds like.
Yeah, right. Well, she's good at dragging it the opposite way.
Right. What? So when you got her, she was a year and a half old. Now, did she come? Like, was she kind of trained for this, or did you have to do all the training?
She did have so actually, she kind of fell into our lap. She was a rescue dog of sorts. Actually, her litter was brought over to a canine training facility, and she didn't make the cut as a canine dog. So. Or a dog for the police force. So a buddy of mine, a real good friend of mine, has the same breed, and I think his dog is 7 now, and that's what he's been using his for tracking, and that his dog is unbelievable at tracking deer. But so one day out of the blue, he calls me and tells me he's got a Bavarian for me, and I had fallen in love with the breed just because it's his dog, and I kind of laughed, and I said, yeah, that's whatever. And he said, no, I'm serious. And he said, but the thing is she's about just over a year old now. Mm-hmm. So, you wouldn't get her as a pup. And so I went to meet her, and, she had a little bit of training there. Mm-hmm. She had done some manhunting and some drug detection and things like that. And she did have a little bit of tracking, like blood tracking and stuff like that, a little bit of practice with that. So there was definitely some experience there. But no, we still laid training tracks for her. So, I mean, every chance we can get out and get her on any type of track, I mean, that's, any track's a good track for her. So,
right.
But yeah, we've done plenty of training with her too. So
nice. I'm just curious if Utah, if you snapped back into your undercover narco days and tried to put this dog on a trail.
Yeah. No, I mean, and kind of like what Shane was talking about, and being with a dog and seeing a dog work. I mean, a house pet is one thing, and it's a man's best friend, and they'll cuddle up with you on the couch and that kind of stuff. But seeing a dog out there in that element as to what they're bred to do, and to see what their genetics, are doing. I got to do a lot of stuff with, German Shepherds, obviously, and it was just always so amazing to me that when they would get out of the car, I mean, it was like clocking in. It's time to go to work. And to watch those dogs, whether it was an attack dog or, when I say attack, I mean, if it was a aggressive trained dog, if it was a bite dog, mm-hmm. Or if it was a passive dog, that would just bark or scratch on indications. But it's so amazing watching those dogs work. And I know that's what Shane's talking about is, that dog, you're just like, wow, like their nose is that good. It's amazing, see them do their things. And that's what always used to impress me the most, man. I kind of miss working with dogs like that.
Yeah. It's kind of cool because it's interesting because we've all three had experience with dogs. Of course, John, yours in the police world, and Shane, of course, yours with tracking. It's like a little known fact about me. I've had a lot of weird jobs and odd jobs over my life. It's like I actually used to train dogs, but it was obedience, on leash and off leash. And then I did help one of the head trainers do a attack training for a dog that he was training for the Philadelphia Police Force. And this was like years ago, and that was the attack one was the last one I did. I helped with the first part of that before I ended up leaving that job. And I don't know that I would want to continue with that because part of my learning or my mentorship was that I was in the bite suit first, and he had it was a Rottweiler, and so having 145 pounds of pissed off Rottweiler running at you is not a real comforting feeling to have, So I don't know how long lived that career track would have been for me, but I'm just curious, man. Like, how do you because I've never worked with a tracking dog ever. I've worked with a little bit of bird dogs and stuff like that, and done some rabbit hunting and stuff like that with small game that I've used dogs with, some friends of family and stuff like that. But how do you get a dog on the trail, and what happens after they get on the track? Like, what's the process? Like, take me through. Like, you get a call, someone needs you to recover a deer for them or help them recover a deer. Like, what's that process once you get, and you don't have any, notion of what happened in the tree or what took place. Like, how do you get started from, I guess, ground zero with the dog?
Well, I'm on the United Blood Trackers website, and actually what you can do is if you click on your state, and it'll bring up all the trackers in your state, and then it'll list where they're from. So if I get a call, most of the time, I shouldn't say most of the time, hopefully it's, fairly close to home. I have had guys, 2-3 hours from here trying to get me to come, quite a ways, but, there's a lot of trackers here in Wisconsin. So I kind of try to steer them in the direction of other trackers if it's closer to somebody else. But so when they call, there's kind of a screening process. You ask them a series of questions, and you try to ask them the same question differently a few times, just to try to find out, to try to really get, to the true story of where the hit is and all of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And, there have been calls, honestly, that I just haven't taken. Just in the interview, you kind of feel like, that's probably not a deer that's going to die. Mm-hmm. And I actually, we've had a couple of different scenarios. I had a guy actually sent me a text here, 2 or 3 weeks ago, of a picture of the deer that he had shot that I told him, it sounded like a deer that would live. And I didn't figure that it would be worth my time to come take the track. Well, he sent me a trail camera picture of that deer, almost a month after he had shot it. It was working a scrape again. So, a deer that had survived the hit. But, if it's a hit, that I feel like is a fairly recoverable deer, we'll show up at the hit site. And I explain to a lot of people, my dog is a real slow working dog. She's not one of those dogs that's just going to come, get in there and just tear off down the trail or anything like that. She's not a barker. What we'll do is I get to the property and I'll, kind of tell them what's going to happen or whatever. And in Wisconsin, I know, it's different in different states. But in Wisconsin, the dog has to be on leash. You can't just let it run free.
Right.
So what I'll do is she's got a harness that she wears, and what we'll do is I'll actually hook my lead into her collar, and then I tell the hunter when we get fairly close to the hit site, let me know, and then that's when I'm gonna I'll put the lead on the harness. And what John had said when he made reference to those dogs, like when you let them out of the car, it's just all of a sudden, they're a lovable, wonderful dog at home or whatever. But when it comes time to work, it's time to work. And for us, when I take that lead and go from her collar onto her harness, that little click onto her harness, that's when it's game time. She knows that, okay, we're here to do a job. And I mean, she's got a good feeling about it when I get the harness itself out, obviously. But
right.
When we get, when that clicks onto her harness, that's when she knows it's time to get started. But yeah, I mean, as far as, taking it on the track, it's just real slow, let the dog do her thing. In my inexperience, I used to try to think for the dog and try to, think, okay, if I was a deer, where would I go?
Mm-hmm.
And if she starts to steer me towards a different direction, earlier, I would start thinking, okay, no, there's no way the deer went that way. Why would it go that direction? It obviously must have gone this way. And it took, 2, 3, 4 times probably of her continually proving me wrong before I realized that she's the one with the nose and I'm just the guy at the other end of the leash, kind of a thing.
Right.
So, it took me a while to get that trust in her. But yeah, once she really started to click and, I kind of started to read more of her signs and what she was telling me. And that's when things really started to go. But, it's like I said, there's just so many things that happen on the trail that I have to try to, see the signs that she's providing me, I guess.
Right.
So I always tell the guys, I tell the hunters, if you guys can just stay behind me, and not get out in front of the dog, because those are kind of things that'll screw her up a little bit. So, and for the most part, the hunters are real good about staying behind, and they kind of want to sit back and watch what's going on with the dog too. So it's kind of a neat experience. I actually took a track here a couple weeks ago, and there was, I think there was 7 or 8 of us on that track when we took it. I mean, it was like an army of people behind me.
Wow.
And I wasn't sure how she was going to handle that with that much traffic, but she did great. She did a really good job on that track. So
nice.
It's kind of cool to get the reaction of other hunters to watch the dog in action and to hear their comments and stuff. It's kind of cool.
Right. I think what's interesting, and John, I can't remember how you said it. It was before we hopped on the phone. You were talking about kind of picking up or like the building a database based off the dog. I don't remember how you asked. How did you frame that when we were talking earlier?
I'm sorry. I lost you there.
Oh, I'm sorry. We were talking earlier before we got Shane on the line about building a database, like using the dog as far as like intel and stuff like that. I don't remember how you asked that question.
Oh, yeah. So Shane, whenever we were talking the other day, you and I touched on, and this is something that, somebody listening may say, well, I don't have a blood tracking dog, so I'll never get to, if you don't have a blood tracking dog, you're not learning anything or whatever. But it's kind of the way you and I were talking the other night, and I believe I mentioned to you the database that you're collecting, because you're getting to start with a hunter, and the hunter says, I was standing there, the deer was standing there, he came from left to right, and then when I shot him, he ran back to his left or whatever. So as you're getting to follow these tracks, you're getting your own personal database of, collection of, okay, 82% of the last deer that I tracked, they all ran downhill into a brushy draw, or they went towards water, et cetera, et cetera. Can you kind of touch on some of that part of just the stuff that you're getting to learn from the dog?
Yeah. So, as far as, kind of, it's going to depend on the hit and all that kind of stuff. But, one thing I have learned is, guys will, come up to an open field and automatically just assume, okay, this deer obviously must have crossed this field. And, that's not necessarily going to be the case. Sometimes they'll kind of button hook back around and go right back into the draw they just came out of. So, they'll do a lot of doubling back and things like that. Like, John, like what you had said about going, into a brushy draw and stuff like that. A deer, most of the time, a wounded deer is going to want to take the path of least resistance. So, if you're hunting a big marsh and, things like that, 9 times out of 10, that deer is going to stay on those big, those trails that go through that kind of stuff, and isn't really going to steer off of that too much until maybe, okay, now it's time to go bed down. I'm not going to bed down right in this trail. I'll kind of go into a brush pile or things like that. But, guys will, they'll just assume that, the deer had to go this way. And, what I'm finding is through experience, that there is no set rule on this kind of stuff. I mean, don't just assume that the deer, it's automatically going to go to a water source or whatever. I mean, that's going to depend on where the hit is, how sick the deer is feeling, things like that. I mean, there's, a lot of times the deer will want to go back where it came from when you shot it, going back to kind of where they felt it was safe before they were shot. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of just little things I think people, kind of misread when it comes to a track like that. So, but yeah, just some things, as far as it really, they're all kind of hit specific, I guess, where the deer is actually hit at kind of depends.
Right.
On what it'll want to do.
Right. No, what about, because I was also curious about kind of like the opposite effect of, you're getting to see a lot of these stand setups and hunting locations and where shots took place, and the same thing that John mentioned. You're getting the intel from the hunter saying that he came from here. He's probably even giving you more than that. He's probably wanting to tell you a little bit of the story, saying, I had him on camera here, and I think he was bedding back here, and he used this trail and came out this way. How much of that type of intel do you use whenever you're thinking about your own stand setups and how you're going to hunt a piece of property, or how you're going to hunt a certain piece of terrain, or how you're going to hunt like a certain weather pattern or whatever, based on some of the conversations you've had on these track jobs?
Well, everybody kind of has their own style for hunting, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know everything about tracking or about hunting in general, but I will apply some of that kind of stuff. Actually, to be honest with you, the biggest thing that I get out of the tracking calls is when my phone really starts to burn up. That's when I know the deer are starting to move pretty good.
There you go.
I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing that I take away from it at this point. My good buddy where I got my dog from, Sean, we'll have conversations all the time. He was, did you get any calls today, or whatever? Well, all of a sudden, we weren't getting anything until all of a sudden this cold front moved in, and bang, all of a sudden our phones are ringing off the hook, kind of a thing. So, I mean, that's kind of the biggest takeaway, I guess, would be, that, to be honest with you.
Right. That's interesting. What do you ever look at that from a historical perspective and say every year right around this date, around these dates is whenever I usually start getting a lot of calls? Do you ever look at it that way?
Yeah. It seems like, we get that first cold front in October, right around the middle of October, we always get that first real cold snap. Our phones will light up then. And then it's just kind of your typical, late October into November. That's the way it is here in the Midwest where I'm at. But, like I said, where it really starts to ring is that first cold snap that we get in October. It seems like we get a week there or, 2-3 days or whatever when, we'll start getting a lot of calls, and then maybe it'll die down a little bit, and then it'll pick back up again towards, Halloween or, a few days before that.
Right. That's interesting. That's a nice little extra piece of intel, man, for the year. It's like I wish someone would call my phone and tell me whenever it was getting ready to pop.
Yeah, right.
So hey,
kind of lucky that way.
Yeah, I know, right? What's the recovery rate when you're using the dog? Is it like in the 90 percentiles, or is it in the 90% range, or is it lower than that? I'm just curious. Like whenever you get a call and you're going out with the dog, what's that success rate look like? Let's take a quick break to hear a word about our partners at Whitetail Institute of North America. If any of you out there are anything like me, you've probably already started at least daydreaming and shifting gears to think about plans for next year. And for me, part of that process is what type of food plots am I going to put in? Where am I going to put food plots? I, of course, have one new property that I'm going to be doing some food plotting on. The first step that I really need to take once I kind of figure all that stuff out is to do a soil test. And you can pick those up at Whitetail Institute of North America or whitetailinstitute.com. Testing your soil is probably the most important step for making sure that you have food plot success. And Whitetail Institute's soil test kit will give you exactly or show you exactly how much lime and fertilizer you'll need and make sure that you don't spend any more money and don't buy anything that you don't need to make sure that your food plots are successful. It's going to ensure the most successful food plot possible. It's going to save you money on fertilizer and lime. It's super easy to use. I've used it last year. They send you a readout with everything that you need to know, and then you also get a professional consultation via a 1-800 number if you need to ask any additional questions. So in order to get set up and prepared to get your food plots in on time this year being the key, hopefully mine will get in on time, head over to whitetailinstituteofnorthamerica.com or whitetailinstitute.com and pick up your soil test kit now to prepare for the spring. And now back to the show.
Before Shane goes into that, I was gonna add something here real quick.
Yeah.
So speaking of like an eyewitness, the hunter, and in my past life, I would go and let's just say it was something like a hit and run. So not real crazy excitement, not like a shooting or something, but you ask somebody, okay, somebody just did a hit and run. What were they driving? Well, I am 100% sure that it was a white Chevy Astro van. You're sure of that? 100%. And then you find the run vehicle, and it was a bright yellow F-350 pickup truck.
Yep.
So it's the eyewitness or the hunter in fear or excitement. People totally lose their crap about where they were, what they saw, what the vehicle did, what the deer did, whatever. And I know Shane and I have had some stories, and Shane's told me some stories where, the guy's like, yep, and the deer ran that way. And Shane's like, well, the dog's picking up blood on the complete opposite end, of where, they thought the deer went. And that's another benefit of the dog, because in those exciting moments, sometimes people get turned around and, especially at nighttime, trying to identify a tree at night from the ground looks totally different than what it looked like in daylight, 20 foot elevated. But so that was something I was gonna add. And then speaking of getting a bunch of phone calls from people telling you, hey, I need a dog, and that being an indication, I do kind of have an advantage. I can always call Sam Calora down the road from Mrs. Dopey at his deer farm.
Yep.
And I've done it. I'll call him. I'm like, hey, Sam, I was thinking about going out today. What are your deer doing? He's like, they're all bedded up. I'm like, cool. I'll stay home today. And then he's called me before and said, every single deer in my pen is running circles around the field. You better get your butt in a tree quick. I'm like, see you, bye. I'm heading out,
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good point, man. Like, Shane, I'm curious, like, so how many big fish stories do you get when you go out for a track? He was this big and he ran this way, and then whenever you...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, the biggest fish story is, and John and I talked about this the other night, is you'll find out that, everybody hit it perfect. Where'd you hit the deer? Oh, I hit it perfect right behind the shoulder. And, these guys that are calling me, they're calling me because they can't find the deer, right? So 90% of the time, if you hit a deer perfect right behind the shoulder, you're probably going to recover that deer. It'll run, 100, 150 yards at the most and fall over dead, So, yeah, that's, as far as, fishtails and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the very first one is always, I hit it perfect, And, it's like I don't say it because it's, just not professional, but I want to tell them, well, if you hit it perfect, you probably wouldn't be calling me. So that's where I go back to. You got to try to figure out a few ways to ask the same question when you're talking to the guys, to find out try to really dig into what you think happened, just going off of what they're feeding you,
Right. Yeah. It's you got to use some of that Johnny Law.
Yeah.
Some of the Johnny Law questioning tactics.
My inner Utah. That's right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And channel your inner Utah. Ask them. Where are you at? Where'd the deer go? What broadhead were you using? Where'd you hit the deer? All those pertinent questions to kind of get it figured out and get it dialed in. That way, you're not tracking a ghost, essentially.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. I mean, like I was saying, earlier, every track is good for a dog, but if you continually take track after track after track after deer that that I feel in my heart probably aren't dead, that can kind of deter the dog after a while too. So,
right.
You want to go after the ones that, and I'm not saying that we turn down a whole bunch of tracks, but there are some where you're just like, I'm not going to go, chase a deer around the timber when I know it's not, probably not going to die. So there is that.
Nice. John, do you have something you want to add here to this one?
No. I kind of interrupted there. I think where we left off was percentage of recoveries or success on recoveries. Now, I do have a question on a second part of that, but I want you to answer that part first.
Yeah. So,
sure.
So percentages. What are you thinking?
So,
what are you at with the dog?
Well, with the United Blood Trackers, the national average is right around like 33% for recovery rate with a dog. Now, that would kind of go back to what I was just saying before is, these guys shoot the deer and, they think they hit it perfect and they get down and they track all over the place and they can't find the deer. So they bring in 6 of their buddies and then they grid search and, search around there for hours and hours. And when you do that, that makes the dog's job, significantly more difficult because all those little scent molecules that, are invisible to the naked eye, this dog, the dog will pick up. And, if you've got 3-4 guys that are dragging scent molecules that direction and then all of a sudden they're dragging them back over this direction, well, that's really going to screw the dog up. So, and again, the problem that we run into is, these guys are calling us because they can't find their deer and they've, gone out and done everything that they can do to try to recover it, by themselves without the use of a dog. And what, honestly, the success rate with dogs would be way higher if you get, these guys that, if you make a bad shot and you think in your heart, okay, I probably hit that one a little bit back, more towards gut, liver, or whatever. If you don't go in there at all, I mean, especially like on a gut shot deer, if you don't go in chasing that deer around at all and just let it go, bring a dog in, your success rate on a gut shot deer is going to skyrocket. I mean, you will be up towards that 80 to 90%. I mean, especially with a gut shot deer, there's just so much scent there. Mm-hmm. That it's almost, for a lot of dogs, it's almost not even a challenge,
right.
Where, if you've taken a gut shot deer, a track, there's really no blood to speak of, so, And, that's where you bring a dog in on something like that, and it's just, they'll blow your mind how quickly they can make work of that. So,
John, do you have part two?
Yeah, so part two, Shane.
Yep.
Obviously, whenever you find deer, or if you don't find deer, I'm sure a lot of times you get to see the hunter's bow, you see his quiver. If you had to say there was one broadhead that you see more often lead to failed recoveries or really, long track jobs that, you did recover, what broadhead would that be? Is it fixed or mechanical? And if it is fixed or mechanical, is there certain broadhead that you see more often on failed recoveries?
Well, first, I'm going to ask a question back. Are you sure we want to go down this path? Because there's an overwhelming answer to this.
I say let's go down. Let's go down the path, man. I'm living on the edge today.
Okay. Okay. So a lot of guys aren't going to want to hear this, and a lot of guys are going to, when they hear me say it, they're like, "Oh, that's not." They're not going to believe it and all that kind of stuff. But it is absolutely overwhelming. A Rage 2-blade broadhead. So that's, to answer your question for the people that don't know, that is a mechanical head, John. And yeah, I mean, I would be willing to say at least, I think I only, of all the tracks I took this year, and I can't put a number on how many that was off the top of my head, but I can only specifically remember one that wasn't a 2-blade Rage broadhead.
Wow.
So, and I don't know, like I said, everybody has, it's like Chevy versus Ford and Dodge. Everybody has their own thing, and I get that. But I'm just, John, you asked, and I'm just telling you, what we've seen.
And here's to kind of pacify, if anybody is shooting a Rage and they believe in their Rage broadheads to be the best, that's awesome. And if it's worked for you every time, then I'm very happy for you, because I don't want anybody to have bad luck. A little sidebar about that. Rage, from my recent calculations, I get to be in a fortunate spot with my job that I do get to know some stats about other brands in the outdoor industry. And Rage does represent about 25% of the broadhead sales in the United States. So there's going to be more people shooting Rage broadheads. I don't know how many broadhead companies are out there right now, 70, maybe even 100 or more. And if they represent 25%, they're going to have more heads out there killing and not killing. You know what I mean? They're just going to have more out in the field anyway. So, not trying to bash a particular broadhead.
No, absolutely.
It's interesting that, what the way I see it is you're doing a controlled group. You're just going out with the dog. You're not, you know what I mean? We're not targeting any particular broadhead, but that's what the facts are showing is that, so it's interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up too, John. It's like they have a more of an opportunity to fail just by sheer number. You know what I mean? There's
numbers, yeah.
You know what I mean? But it is interesting that you're seeing that more often than not. I just think because I can speak just from personal experience. I pretty much put the nail in the coffin of Rage ever wanting to be part of the show here. But I shot a Rage and hit a deer. At one point.
Hold on, let me get my hammer and my nail real fast.
Yeah,
okay.
Good.
Yeah, right.
I hit it was a doe. It was a 37-yard shot, I think. I hit her a little back, but didn't get a full pass through. No, she expired, and I ended up retrieving her. But I switched to broadheads after that, and every deer after that, complete pass through, no questions asked, through bone, the whole nine. And that was just kind of what made me a believer to kind of, I tried a new broadhead because of that. I was like, man, I really feel like I should have gotten a pass through with that. Didn't get it. Changed to broadhead, started getting pass throughs after that. And, I started having deer tip over, within 40 yards, 50 yards or so of the shot site. Which then, I stay with the broadhead that I use now. But, you know, I can kind of attest to that, you know, it just didn't perform as I would have liked it to, you know, and there's also that debate too. I mean, is a mechanical right for me, even just based on my draw length and the poundage that I'm pulling, you know, because I've listened to some, you know, archery pros talk about, you know, if you got a draw length that's any shorter than like 29 inches and you're pulling back any less than 65 to 70 pounds at that draw length, then you shouldn't shoot a mechanical. And I don't quote me on like the length and the poundage, but essentially the takeaway was I have a 26.5-inch draw length and I'm pulling like 62 to 63 pounds, and I was losing so much kinetic energy on impact to open the blades that, in all honesty, it's like if I want the best performance, I shouldn't be shooting a mechanical, is what my takeaway was from that learning. So you can put that on me as well as the hunter of not choosing the right tool for the job as well. So, but that was my experience. But nail in coffin, I think, right?
Well, you know, you bring up an interesting point though too, that, you know, you shot ahead that you didn't, you know, weren't real happy with how it performed, and you made that change. So, I mean, I guess I would encourage, you know, your other listeners to do the same thing. If you shoot ahead and you're kind of, you know, you weren't happy with the penetration or, you know, the size of the hole, the blood track, whatever, you know, don't be afraid to change, I guess, you know, instead of, you know, continuously, you know, questioning everything about, you know, gosh, should I shoot a different head or whatever, you know, because you're not having the performance that you want. You know, make a change. You know, look into a different kind of head. Like John said, there's 100 different heads out there to pick up, you know, to pick out now. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, kudos to you, I guess, for making the change too. You know, that's a good point too.
Well, it's one of those things. I think archery more so than, you know, a lot of other hunting sports, you know, I would say is that you have to have confidence in your gear, especially your bow and your arrows and your broadheads, to know that they're going to fly true and do the job they're supposed to do. Because otherwise, you know, you don't want to be thinking about those things whenever you're trying to make a shot. You know what I mean? It's like you just want to go through your muscle memory and you want to execute a good shot and you know, and make a clean kill. You know, that's what you want to do. And so, you know, I think most hunters want to have their gear perform. You know, and I kind of echo the same thing you said there. It's, you know, if you're having challenges, don't be afraid to switch it up, man. A lot of these broadheads now fly nearly as true as field points. You know what I mean? So your retuning and stuff is minimal in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But hey, man, I want to dive into a couple other topics here. So I think we covered kind of the you know, talking about the dog a little bit here, and I definitely didn't want to discuss that. But I also want to kind of give people at home that are listening an opportunity to kind of learn, like, what should happen after the shot, right? Because I think a lot of times, of course, the adrenaline's pumping, people are excited, they probably make some critical mistakes before they even get to a point to call you that makes even your job that much more challenging, and may even possibly be able to help them recover the deer without, you know, getting someone else involved. So I wanted to kind of go through like a couple scenarios of you personally being in a tree, and like, what are the steps that you would take, you know, and I guess I'll just tee it up this way. So if you're in a tree and you just released an arrow on your target buck, right, and you think it's a lethal hit, you know, what is the absolute first thing you do after you release the arrow and you're watching the deer run off? What's the first thing Shane does?
Well, I guess one thing that I would encourage right off the bat is for people to shoot lighted nocks. I know John and I both really like the Luminoc. You know, it'll give you a better idea of where the arrow went in. But, you know, I hear all the time, you know, when I take these tracks and stuff like that, the things that the people say was, oh, it happened so fast, you know, I rushed the shot and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, I guess one of the things I would encourage, you know, another thing is you have a little bit more time than you think you do. Mm-hmm. I know it always seems like it happens just like that, and it really truly does. But take an extra second to make sure that pin is right where you want it to be, you know, and you got the right pin on it and all that kind of stuff. But as far as, okay, so if I release an arrow and I feel like, okay, yep, I double lung that deer, you know, so assuming I didn't see the deer fall, okay, so one of the things that I tell the guys is, okay, what does your gut tell you? Where do you think you hit the deer and all that? So go with your gut. The first thing I'm going to do is, you know, like I said, I'll, you know, hopefully see that arrow go in. I'll watch the deer go as far as you can. You know, obviously watch as far as you can see it. You know, I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen on a deer show on TV, all these guys that shoot a deer, and the first thing they want to do is turn around and look back at the camera, and they don't even watch the deer run off, right. You know? Well, you're missing a lot of information. I mean, right. Okay, the deer just went past that great big crooked oak tree and it made a hard left, you know, or it went out into that CRP field about halfway, and then all of a sudden I couldn't see it anymore, okay? So, you know, you're thinking, okay, maybe it fell down right there. So, you know, listen, watch the deer as long as you can. Listen, you know, to see, okay, is it crash, 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 and all of a sudden you hear this one big crash and then it's dead quiet. I mean, that's a pretty good indication, okay, the deer is down. Mm-hmm. But for me, you know, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to hang up my bow, kind of replay things in my mind, what's my gut telling me. And, you know, everybody wants to get down and, you know, and rush over and look at things right away. Well, you know, most of the time when your adrenaline's going and all that kind of stuff, sit down, try to relax. I mean, you know, we talk about injuries and stuff in the tree stand. You know, when your adrenaline's really kicking in and you're really shaking and all that, you know, that's probably not a good time to climb down out of a tree and go look at an arrow. You know, right. Get your wits about yourself, you know, sit down for a little bit. But, you know, as far as when, you know, like we were saying, you try to kind of pick out some landmarks, try to figure out where you think the deer went. And then, you know, just let some time go by. You know, there's no real rush, right? I mean, guys want to get down and rush things right away. Well, you know, like I said, most of the time, you know, especially now with me with the dog, I mean, I'll go back to the truck to get the dog at the very least. But, you know, that's what I would encourage a lot of these guys, you know, maybe go back to the truck, sit down, you know, take your camo off, whatever, you know, just kind of think about things a little bit. All you're doing is giving the deer more time to expire, right? And if it's already dead, well, I guess it's going to be more dead when you get there, right? I mean,
right.
There's no real reason to rush anything. So, I mean, that, you know, those are kind of, you know, and I guess depending on where the deer ran, okay, the deer ran kind of back towards the truck. Well, I would try to make a loop, you know, way out and around. Try not to go back, you know, where you think the deer ran. You know, if you have to make a huge loop and go way out and around to get to the truck or whatever you're driving, do that. You know, don't, even if you know, if you got to walk a half a mile out of the way, the last thing you want to do is go in and bump that deer because it's not expired yet.
Right.
So, you know, that's just kind of, I guess, some of the few things that I would offer.
Now, do you have like a standard? Is there any set amount of time that you'll stay in the stand? I know for me, it's like my kind of rule of thumb is I make myself stay in the stand for like 30 minutes before I even get down. Now, that's if I think I even put a good shot on a deer, you know, that it was a lethal shot. It's like my rule of thumb is sit down for 30 minutes, just wait, and send some text messages out maybe to some buddies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then kind of make my move from there and start whatever my process is going to be after that. What's your rule of thumb with that?
Yeah, I mean, if you can sit there, you know, I'll sit there as long as I can. You know, if I can, you know, depending on the shot, if I can use the cover of darkness to get out of there, so I know I'm not spooking anything on my way out, I'll do that. You know, another thing that I'd like to say is, you know, if you shoot a deer and it runs off to an area and it just kind of disappears, I like to sit there for a while because a lot of times, you know, in areas where there's a high population of deer, you might have more deer that'll go over around that area where, you know, you think, you know, maybe you last saw your deer. And sometimes you can read the body language of those deer, you know, that there might be something you know, that there might be a dead deer laying there, right, kind of a thing. Or, you know, you can just kind of read their body language. If they're kind of walking back and forth and looking back at the same particular spot, well, that's probably a pretty good indication that your deer is laying there dead. You know? So, yeah, I mean, just take some stuff in, you know, right, just try to use some of that.
That's interesting.
You mentioned Mother Nature's knowledge almost, you know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're gonna give you some intel. You just got to be observant to it. It's interesting that you mentioned body language, though, 'cause I was always curious if if you're able to tell just from the body language of the deer when it's hit, like what type of hit you have. Like, so if he does a big mule kick, it's like sometimes you'll hear people say it's like, well, if he does a big mule kick, he's gut shot because it pinches more, or maybe or it's a heart shot. Like, everyone has like a different theory. Is there anything that you feel has kind of proven out to you that whenever you've seen an arrow hit, that certain placements of the arrow result in certain body language or reaction from the deer?
Yeah, I guess, one thing that I've noticed, that if a deer hunches up and kind of runs away all hunched up, generally that's going to be a gut or liver hit deer. It's going to be, more towards the back. That high leg kick, it's kind of I don't know, it's almost like a misrepresentation of where you hit, because I've seen deer that have gotten hit kind of back that have done that, and then I've seen deer that have gotten hit right behind the shoulder that have done that. So,
right.
There's really no set in stone thing that I've noticed, other than, like I said, if I see one hunch over and kind of, almost run away like they have a gut ache, if you will. If your stomach hurts, you're kind of hunched over and you just don't feel good. It usually a gut shot deer or liver shot deer will react that way.
Right.
So
that's interesting. So I'm curious now, because we're talking about different types of placements and stuff here. So, I know one thing that I always like to do, and this is, I don't think I'm not teaching anything or here that, or saying anything people probably don't already kind of think to do to a degree,
right.
But I'm curious to get your perspective, because I want to kind of get the notion of the different ways that you can read this. So, whenever you walk up to your shot site, the first thing I like to do, of course, and most people probably like to do, is I try to locate my arrow. Did I get a full pass through, and can I find the arrow? Because I want to check the blood on the arrow and kind of see what it tells me. What does the blood on the arrow, assuming that it is recovered, tell you from this point? And, and what are you looking for? What's good versus what's bad? Like, what's the blood look like? Do you smell it? Like, so just kind of walk me through that so you can kind of get a sense of, because maybe you come to track my deer and I say, man, I hit him perfect right behind the front shoulder. I'm pretty sure I got 2 lungs. I might even got some heart. You know what I mean? And then you go up and look at the arrow, and that's really going to probably tell you a lot more than what I just told you as far as like the placement, as far as the truth goes. So tell me what you're looking for there, and then what the different types of blood or what the arrow is going to tell you.
So, depending on where you hit it. So if you recover an arrow, there's a lot of, like, let's say, white hair at the hit site, and the arrow is just kind of almost like greasy looking, like fatty or whatever. Most of the time that's going to be more like a brisket hit, which most of the time that deer is not gonna pass away from that shot. It's not a fatal shot. If it kind of depends on the color of the blood. So if you're getting, a double lung shot, you're going to have, more of a pinkish blood. You will notice bubbles and things like that. And when I say bubbles, most of the time the bubbles are going to be pretty good sized, like, the size of like a pencil head or bigger, you know what I mean? Not like pin drop type bubbles.
Right.
Because, we do take a lot of tracks. Guys are like, oh yeah, there's bubbles in the blood, and you get there. And what people don't realize is when you shoot a deer and you put an opening in that deer, when they're running, there's kind of some air pumping back and forth in that wound, and that'll actually kind of form bubbles in the blood, like real small bubbles. And people will be thrown off by that because they think, oh, that I must have got lungs because there's bubbles in the blood.
Right.
That's not necessarily the case. So, a liver hit deer will be a real dark blood. Like a bright red blood is going to be more of like a muscle hit, like a high back, or something like that. And again, a deer that's probably not recoverable. That's one when I'm taking the tracking calls. That's one of the things we ask is what color is the blood, and if they say, oh, it's a real bright red, that's actually not a good indication. Whereas a lot of people think, oh, a real bright red, that must be a lung hit. That deer's got to be dead.
Right.
And that's actually simply just not the case. So yeah, honestly, a darker blood is going to be a better indication of a fatal hit. If it's darker, it's probably, going to be a fatal shot.
Right. So, and then of course you have that telltale smell if you got some gut in that too.
Yeah. If the arrow stinks, then, or it's kind of greasy and like green. I shouldn't say greasy, more of like a greenish color. I mean, that's obviously going to be an indication of a gut hit. So.
Right. Yeah, I had a oh crap moment whenever I shot my buck this year because I got down. I knew I laced him, and I got down. I waited for, waited my 30 minutes. I heard him crash, so I was like feeling good. I got down, but I had an oh crap moment because there was white hair at the site, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. Now, he was quartering away. I was shooting into his left side, and he was quartering away. And I got to the deer. Of course, I mean, he piled up about 40 yards away from where I shot him, but I had an entrance through the heart and out in front of the front shoulder through the brisket. So it entered behind his left shoulder, got heart, and then came out the front right in front of his right front shoulder. But it definitely made my heart drop for a second when I saw the white hair. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
What's funny about it, I actually took a call during the gun season. The guy had shot it and, thought he had made a good hit on it, whatever. And we went to the hit site and there was white hair all over the place. And I thought, oh boy, I kind of looked at him. I said, well, and he thought maybe, after seeing all the hair, maybe, that it was a, low hit, that maybe it just grazed the belly. And I thought, well, that's what just by looking at the hair, that's what I'm thinking happened. But, we're here, so let's see what the dog can do. And, again, she proved me wrong. I figured the deer went, one direction. She kind of veered off to the left and kind of zigzagged back and forth. Well, all of a sudden I look down, I'm like, oh, I got blood here. I got blood here and I got blood here. And for the most part, I don't look for blood when I'm taking the track with the dog because I need to be, pretty in tune with what she's doing. I need to concentrate more on her than I do the actual blood.
Right.
And all of a sudden we started getting, just following her, I could just see, okay, there's blood. Okay, now all of a sudden there's blood everywhere. And we got up there and he had actually hit that deer in the neck.
Oh, wow.
And didn't hit the white patch or didn't hit anything in the down near the bottom of the chest that there was any kind of white hair. So I still don't know where all that white hair came from. So, yeah, it was just kind of a weird deal when you talk about seeing white hair and you're kind of like, oh boy, because that's exactly what I thought when we got there. I thought, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah, it was just one of those things. I was just going to say, for me, it was just one of those things that whenever I took the shot, it's like I knew he was quartering away, but I took enough of a compensation for him quartering away to place the entrance correctly. I just didn't think that it was, I didn't think the angle was that to where it was going to come out in front of his front shoulder.
Right.
But yeah, I was happy whenever I found him piled up, and it was, a happy ending.
No better feeling than that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Man, I wanted to ask you one other thing, and then we'll, I know I want to be sensitive to your time here. We've been on for about an hour, and I want to make sure you got some time to relax here before you go back to work tomorrow morning. But, I'm always curious, man, because I'm always hesitant. This is just me personally. I have a hard time unless I have almost like a no-brainer, quote unquote slam dunk shot, 20 yards broadside type of thing. And I know that there are no such things as chip shots when you're archery hunting, but if the conditions are kind of wet out for me and stuff like that, I look for something that I'm not gonna have to do a lot of tracking. You know what I mean? At least I try to. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious. For you, how does your approach change with tracking or trying to get on a trail, or even if it's you hunting and it's you got some rain, or maybe it rained the night before and the ground's wet, or whatever the case might be. How do you approach tracking and getting on blood in wet conditions and recovering a deer, whether it's rain, snow? And if it's snow, it'd be light snow to where it's not sticking to get coloration on the ground.
Yeah. Well, for me, that's going to be a little bit different because with the dog, it's a little bit different scenario for that. But, a little bit of rain actually if we can go back to the dog for a little bit here, a little bit of rain actually isn't going to hurt the dog. In some cases, it'll actually kind of keep the scent fresh. If it's not a ton of rain, okay, there's a difference between a little bit of rain and a lot of rain. A lot of rain obviously will, wash pretty much every scent, any scent away, or, a lot of the scent or a lot of the blood, or, any of that kind of stuff. So that makes it pretty challenging regardless if you have a dog or not. But, a little bit of light rain, we'll take calls from guys that, I shot a deer tonight, it's supposed to rain. Can we go look for it tonight? And, what people don't realize is, just that little bit of rain actually can help the track. So we encourage guys, let's just wait till tomorrow morning and we'll take the track tomorrow morning. I think the mistake that a lot of people make with tracking a deer is they feel like they got to get on it right away. Mm-hmm. And, I know I've heard a lot of guys say, it's a liver hit, or a gut hit deer. I did the right thing. I waited 4 hours and I went in there. And it seems like people think that 4 hours is like, that's the magical number. If I wait 4 hours, that deer's going to be dead. And, our experience with the dogs is that that's just not the case. I mean, I'll tell guys, hey, let's wait more like 12 hours. If we can wait till tomorrow, let's do that. Let's go in there tomorrow at noon, that kind of thing.
Right.
Because we've had deer that a buddy of mine, Sean, he took a track, was that last year? I think it was. They tracked it. I think it was like the next day, and they came up on the deer and it was still alive, and it got up and took off running. And they actually went back in there the next day, and it was still alive and got up running and took off running again. And that was a gut shot deer. So, the deer, I always tell people if we were half as tough as deer were, well, I think we'd all live till we were 120 years old.
Right.
It's just amazing how tough these animals are. And their will to live it's strong, so mm-hmm. That's why I tell guys, try to wait as long as you can. And I know another thing that comes up a lot is, we got coyotes, the coyotes are real bad or whatever.
Right.
In the years that I've been doing this, you'd be surprised how little we get to a deer that's been laying there for a day or 12 hours, whatever. The amount of deer that are hit by coyotes or whatever is very minimal. It doesn't happen as often as what people think. Now, I'm not telling you that that's a golden rule, because I know there are areas where they do have that happen a little bit more frequently, but it's just not as common as what people think it is, I guess.
Right.
So.
Interesting. I'm curious with the rain thing. How does the rain help? I would think that would be like an absolute deterrent.
Well, when it gets into like a real dry, if it's kind of a dry scenario, the grass gets real dry, that scent kind of dries up a little bit. And if you can get a little bit of rain on top of that, that'll kind of freshen it up a little. It's like blood. If it's all dried up, if you pour a little water on it, that kind of makes it fresh again, so to speak. And that's kind of how it works with the scent too, I guess. If that would be my way of dumbing it down a little bit, I guess, kind of a thing.
Right.
But yeah, it just kind of helps freshen it a little bit if it's real dried out.
Right. All right, man. So I know we've kept you here for just a little over an hour. I want to be sensitive to, like I mentioned, to your time. But I have one last question for you. Unless, John, do you have anything else to jump in on?
Yeah. One more thing. Speaking of blood tracking dogs and my experience with canines. So I know working with the canine handlers when they were doing tracks, Shane, it was humidity will hold in moisture. And like if there's dew on the grass and dew on the leaves and stuff like that, that will hold in moisture as well. So what I always find interesting is that's accepted. But I still see the argument a lot of times with guys saying, well, I like to walk in the woods when there's dew on the ground because it's water and it's washing the scent off my boots. And I'm going, no, there's moisture on the leaves. Those dew droplets are holding that moisture. And I've had people argue with me. What is your, what have you learned as far as how effective the dog's nose is? Because in a sense, a dog's, the olfactory glands of a dog is, it's the same thing we're trying to defeat with a whitetail. Have you learned anything from the dog blood tracking that either reinforces your scent control beliefs or has, proved something to be a myth?
Well, I guess in the experience that I have, John, I almost have it a little bit of the opposite of that. It seems like with a dew a morning dew, those are the days that my dog really struggles to pick up a scent trail. So again, that almost is I guess my experience, but a little bit opposite of that. I don't mean to tell you you're wrong or nothing like that. I'm just telling you how it's worked for us this year. In particular, I know both myself and my good buddy Sean and his wife, all three of us took a track one particular morning this year when it was a really, really dewy morning, and all three dogs really struggled. I mean, I like, for me personally, I put my dog Emma right down. We found some blood, and I put her nose right in the blood, and she sniffed it and just kind of put her head up like, all right, what else? Kind of a thing. And I mean, it was like literally like she could not even smell it. So it's just, and then again, you go out in the rain after a little rain. And I think, the difference is that the rain is falling down onto the scent, where the dew almost like covers it in a way, it's, kind of just encapsulates the scent. And, so like I said, it's almost like the dogs they can't even smell it, period. It's just kind of weird.
I was going to say, could it possibly be that, so I'm going to try to think through this. So if you're in the timber, right, and so maybe I call you up and I've gone looking for my deer and I didn't find it, and I tracked all over the place and dumped my scent everywhere, right? And you come back in the morning when the dew is there, and it's kind of a challenge because now you're working with the scent overall being kind of diminished, but I've also put my scent all over the place, where it's like maybe if the rain comes, right, that it's kind of like nature's deodorizer. And I don't, you know what I mean, to where it's like it knocks down the what I'll call the ambient scent of everything else. Yeah. And I'm just totally talking shit here because I don't know if what I'm saying is actually true or not. But maybe it's just the structure of blood, like the molecular structure of blood, is such that rain alone isn't going to diminish it enough, but it will diminish the other the molecules around it more so, to where now it's more prominent than the ambient scent around it. Totally made that up. We should write it down somewhere.
And I think, I think it's there.
What's that?
I do think that, like,
no, well, it seems like a heavy downpour rain will wash away scent.
Right.
We all talk about how I went in there and hung a couple of sets, and I'm glad it rained and it washed away the scent. I'm wondering if, the moisture, if it can kind of amplify that scent, and if it could kind of spread that scent around. I wonder if on a dewy morning, if that's why the dog may struggle some. And whereas a whitetail is not necessarily trying to pinpoint, they're just thinking, I smell something, I'm out of here. I don't think they really care, whereas an investigator hears a gunshot, he wants to find out where the gunshot came from. If a deer truly knew what a gun was and they heard a gunshot, don't need to know where it is, I'm just going to go the other direction, Right. So I wonder if that's kind of the way the scent works with moisture. I don't know.
It's interesting.
I was just kind of curious if maybe there was any correlation between blood sniffing versus, maybe a whitetail's nose.
Right. The only other
thing
I was going to say, the only other thing I can think of possibly is that, I don't know. This doesn't make any sense either. I was going to say maybe it's because whitetail are working the wind more so than they're working the scent on the ground per se. Like I don't know if that would make a difference. Whereas the dog seems like it's working the scent on the ground versus, the how the scent is interacting with wind currents. But again, I'm totally making that up too. So I'm just making stuff up tonight if you guys can't tell.
Well, I mean, honestly, the dog will use the wind to their advantage too.
Okay.
I know I had Emma out on a track last year. She actually picked up the deer before we even got to the track. Oh, wow. Before we even hit, the hit site or anything. She had already, you could tell she had already picked up on, on the scent of the dead deer laying there. And again, I wanted her to take the track, so we took her to the track, and yeah, it took us right, where she had thrown her head up and wanted to go to the deer right from the get-go. Yeah, I mean, so she was using the wind. I mean, the deer will use the wind, or the dogs will use the wind too.
Okay, interesting.
But I wish I was a little bit more educated on the dew and rain and how that affected the track. I would like to be able to answer more of that, but I did. I haven't read enough books, I guess.
Right.
That's what I'll leave it at that.
Another topic for another time, man. It'll be a whole other podcast.
Yeah, right.
We
there
can
you
do
go.
That. We're just saving the goods for later.
Whose idea was it to have this guy on here anyways? He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Exactly.
Oh, man. Hey, so with that, man, I want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
And I want to get a sense of, give me the story of the toughest track job that you've ever been on and where you ended up finding the deer at the end of the track.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, honestly, I feel like the toughest track job that we took, we actually didn't recover the deer. We had a guy had called on, I guess it was a Saturday afternoon, and I actually was on my way out to the tree at that point, and asked me if I would take a track for him. And I said, well, I can do it in the morning. Well, the more we get to talking, he tells me he shot the deer Friday night, and they had gone in and looked for it, and they couldn't recover the deer. And I, kind of listened to his story, and I felt like, well, it kind of sounds like maybe it was a high back shot. Maybe a deer that wouldn't be recoverable. And he said, well, if you don't mind, for a sense of closure, I would really like to have the dog come up and give it a shot. And I said, okay, that's fine. Like I said, every track's a good track. So I went up there the next day, and we had gotten a really hard frost that night. And it was in a sumac swamp where it was, the grass was anywhere from 4 to 6 feet high, pretty much the entire track.
Jeez.
And, I had, the dog was, there was actually areas where there was a light skim of ice that she was breaking through. There was times when she was almost swimming. And, for majority of that track, had I not had her on a leash, I never would even have known where she was.
Wow.
Because the grass was so tall, I couldn't even see her. And again, with the frost and all of that kind of stuff. And she took that track, I want to say like just short 800 yards. It was like 700 and something, 90 something or whatever yards. I have a GPS tracker app on my phone. Mm-hmm. And, again, I'm just kind of, I can't see her, and I could just tell by the tension on the leash, if she's got it or not. Mm-hmm. And I'm following her, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Well, then all of a sudden, the guy that I'm with says, "Yep, she's on it. I've got a little drop of blood right here." And I didn't think much of it. We kind of kept going, whatever. And he said, "Yep, I got another drop here." And she was at a point where she had lost it, and she was trying to get back on the track. So I was just sitting there letting her do her thing. And I looked back, just to kind of see what kind of blood we were talking about. And we're talking like almost pin drops of blood that are, waist high, and she's down, clearly not waist high. I mean, she's not a great big tall dog,
right?
And she's picking that up, going through this grass that's 6 feet high, and I was just blown away. I mean, that was when I really, really appreciated what a dog can do with a track. I mean, I was just blown away by that. And again, every once in a while, he would give me an indication. Yep, I got a little drop here, and I'd keep following her, and eventually, we just hit a dead end. We hit a wall. We made a big loop around and try to get her back on it again, and she was never able to get back on that track. But yeah, I mean, we were talking. All said and done, when we started that track, it was 41 hours old.
Jeez. And
she had taken it almost 800 yards through, like I said, where was areas where she was almost swimming. She was breaking ice and just, grass at 6 feet high. I mean, that was quite, what I guess the most difficult track, and again, it was one of those tracks I was just blown away. It was such an awesome track to watch her work. It was, well, to not watch her work, to feel her work. I guess it was more of what it was with that leaf, So yeah, it was pretty incredible. I walked away that day really thinking, wow, she's something else to be able to work through that one. But,
yeah, man, that's awesome. That's impressive, man. Her nose, the way.
Yeah, it was pretty neat.
Yeah. But hey, man, I want to say thanks for coming on. Appreciate you making some time to come on and chat tonight, man. I know I learned a ton. I'm sure everyone out there listening definitely picked up some pointers on some things they could be doing to track a little better and get on blood trails. But before I let you go, is there anywhere you want to send people to kind of follow along with your hunting season, or get in touch with you if it's regarding tracking? Is there a Facebook or Instagram page you want to tell people about?
Well, I know I'm on Arrow Wild. You can see actually kind of how my season played out last year. I did shoot a buck that was that's actually featured on one of the episodes on the Arrow Wild Facebook page. For guys in Wisconsin that are looking, if they would want me to track, again, you can go to the United Blood Trackers website, and if you're in Wisconsin and just scroll down, and again, you'll see all the trackers, and my name and phone number, all my contact information is on there, so they can go that route if they're looking to looking for a track here in Wisconsin.
Nice. Well, hopefully you have many good tracks this year, many recovered deer, and I hope you get to track one of your own too.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Yeah, it would be nice to find one of my own for a change. Yeah.
Right. I hear you, man. Hey, I appreciate you coming on, man. You have a good rest of your night, and we'll talk soon. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. We'd like to thank Shane for joining us. And before we shut this thing down, I want to give a quick reminder to be sure to enter for a chance to win an Exodus Lift 2 trail camera. All you have to do is go to the truthfromastand.com webpage and go to the About page and sign up for our email newsletter. You can also submit through the sign up button on the Truth from a Stand Facebook page. Once we've received 200 entries, which we're almost there, we'll do a drawing for the winner and deliver the goods. With that, be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes if you haven't already. And last but not least, we want to thank all of you for listening. And finally, I need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Whitetail Institute of North America, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Lone Wolf Portable Tree Stands. And until next time, Merry Christmas and have a safe holiday, everyone. We'll see you.
I ain't welcome anymore. A long time coming, if it all. It takes a special knowing to call for. Damaged heads, broken letters. Rationalize yourself in numbers, but I